Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start by taking a look at the day's headlines. US President Donald Trump fires back at his critics who say progress on North Korea's denuclearization has stalled since the Singapore summit last summer. He says he's done more on North Korea than any other US president. South Korea are back in Asian Cup action tonight. Next up is Qatar in the last 8 knockout clash. Hopes are high. Paulo Bento's squad can make the semis. Plus, we get the latest on the political crisis in Venezuela as President Nicolas Maduro clings to power as the people rise up against the socialist policies which have destroyed the South American country's economy. Let's start today at the White House. A defiant President Trump is sharply defending his administration's North Korea policy, stressing the successes he's had with the regime and the friendly ties he's established with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He's reacting to the negative media coverage he's been receiving, with his critics saying little to no progress has been made on Pyongyang's denuclearization for several months now. Lee Ji-won starts us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump insists there has been progress in talks with North Korea, adding he expects another good summit with the regime's leader. In a flurry of tweets on Thursday, President Trump said the media, which he described as, quote, fake news, has unfairly accused him of producing few tangible results on the regime's denuclearization since the first summit in Singapore last June. He said the evaluation is wrong and that from 40 years of doing nothing and being at the brink of war, he's built a relationship, brought back home hostages and Korean War remains, stopped rockets or missiles being fired, and most importantly, stopped nuclear testing, all in just 15 months. Trump said this is more than anything anyone else had accomplished with the North, and that he expects another good meeting with Kim Jong-un soon, where there is much potential. After a long stalemate between the two sides, North Korea's point man on nuclear negotiations with the U.S., Kim Yong-chol, flew over to Washington to resume their high-level talks. And after President Trump met with him, the White House announced that the second North Korea-U.S. summit will take place at the end of February. Working-level talks followed right after in Sweden, where officials are thought to have discussed the denuclearization negotiations and other details for the upcoming summit. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also showed high hopes for the summit in his interview with Fox News days earlier in the week. He said there are many conversations going on and that Kim Jong-un continues to assure President Trump that he is intent on denuclearization. And when the two leaders get together, Pompeo said he hopes to make substantial steps towards that. He added that they knew this was going to be a long process and that the first 2 steps of stopping the North's testing of missile programs and nuclear bombs still continue. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, South Korean Foreign Minister Kyung-wha, who's in Davos for the World Economic Forum, is urging North Korea to make concrete pledges on denuclearization during the next Pyongyang-Washington summit. Kang said such pledges include dismantling its main nuclear complex and allowing international inspectors in to confirm the progress. Speaking to Reuters, Kang said she's optimistic North Korea will agree to concrete steps towards the scrapping of their nuclear and ballistic missile programs. She added the North's economy will never improve unless such steps are taken. The U.S. State Department has confirmed the chief nuclear negotiators of the United States and China met in Washington this week to discuss the latest developments with North Korea. It says U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun and Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Kong Xuangliu held talks on Wednesday. The two sides addressed efforts towards advancing the final, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea while discussing the importance of continuing to implement sanctions. Now, in other news, South Korea's defense ministry has released proof that a Japanese warplane flew at a low altitude near a South Korean vessel earlier this week. The 5 photos back up Seoul's claim that the patrol aircraft was approaching the warship in what Seoul says was a threatening manner. Kyung-wha reports.
On Thursday, Seoul's Ministry of National Defense released 5 photographs taken from the Navy destroyer Daejeong to back up its claim that a Japanese maritime patrol aircraft flew near the ship at a low altitude. 2 pictures taken from the ship's thermal observation camera and 1 taken by the ship's camcorder show the Japanese airplane approaching. The other 2 photos are of radar data indicating that the Japanese plane was flying at an altitude of just 200 feet or about 60 meters. A day earlier, the Defense Ministry called the flight a provocative act. The Daejeong was on a regular mission Wednesday near Korea's southernmost island of Yeodo when the Japanese plane came as close as 540 meters. The Navy vessel sent multiple messages to the plane, saying it was flying in a threatening manner and asking that it change course.
The fact that Japan has conducted another aggressive low-altitude flight despite South Korea's clear requests that it prevent this from happening again is an unambiguous provocation against a ship belonging to a military partner. Thus, we cannot help but question Japan's intentions, and we strongly condemn Japan's actions. Should this happen again, we will respond in line with our military's code of conduct.
Hours later, Seoul's Defense Ministry called in the Japanese military attaché and lodged a strong protest. According to the South Korean military, Wednesday's low-altitude flyby was the 3rd one just this month. The other 2 happened on the 18th and the 22nd. But Tokyo denies Seoul's claims, saying the plane was on a regular mission, that it was not flying in a threatening way, and that it was not at the low altitude South Korea claims. The latest incident has stoked the already rising tensions between the 2 countries. Only about a month ago, a dispute erupted over claims by Japan that another South Korean ship used its targeting radar on a Japanese plane while on a mission to rescue a North Korean boat, something Seoul says there's no evidence for. Kyung-wha, Arirang News.
Now, continuing his tour of South Korea aimed at vitalizing local economies, President Moon Jae-in dropped by the central city of Daejeon on Thursday. While there, he stressed the importance of developing new technologies so the country as a whole can thrive in the era of the 4th Industrial Revolution and hopefully create some much-needed jobs along the way. Hwang Ho-jun reports.
Back in the 1960s, the only thing Korea could make with its own technology was a radio, while America was about to send a man to the moon. But now, thanks to the emergence of the 4th Industrial Revolution, President Moon Jae-in says South Korea can compete with the best of them.
뒤따라갈 필요도 없고 흉내낼 이유도 없습니다. 우리가 생각하고 만들면 그것이 세계의 표준이 될 수 있습니다.
During his visit to the city of Daejeon, the 5th leg of his national tour of local economies, President Moon met with scientists and researchers, and he insisted that the nation is teed up perfectly to become a global leader.
4차 산업혁명 시대는 우리에게 새로운 도전입니다. 그러나 추격형에서 선도형 경제로 나아갈 수 있는 절호의 기회를 주었습니다. 과학기술의 혁신이 그 출발점이 될 것입니다.
President Moon pledged active support from the government to achieve several things. It will aim to boost the nation's data market to about $26.6 billion by 2023. It will set up 3 new advanced education centers by 2022 in order to cultivate more than 10,000 experts in artificial intelligence. And it will create an environment that encourages R&D in basic science by expanding funding to $2.2 billion by 2022 from the current $1.5 billion. The government will also work to increase investment in leading businesses, including so-called superconnected intelligence, smart factories, and fintech. President Moon asked the city of Daejeon, home to many research institutes, to lead South Korea into the 4th Industrial Revolution. Before returning back to Seoul, President Moon paid a visit to the Korea Aerospace Research Institute to encourage the researchers there. He congratulated the institute on the successful launch last November of the nation's first homegrown space rocket engine, the Nuriho. He also stressed the importance of Korea's independent technology and urged the researchers not to be afraid of failure, but to move forward in order to achieve success. Hong Jun, Arirang News.
South Korea's central bank held its maiden monetary policy meeting of 2019 on Thursday. The Bank of Korea lowered its growth outlook for this year and, as was widely expected by most analysts, held its key rate steady for the month of January as well. Kim Hae-sung reports.
The Bank of Korea forecasts the local economy to grow by 2.6% in 2019, down 0.1% from its earlier projection last October. It also cut its inflation forecast from 1.7% to 1.4%.
We slightly lowered this year's growth forecast due to weakening global growth. Overall, it is similar to last year's growth rate. We also downgraded our inflation forecast mainly on plummeting global oil prices and the government's social welfare policies.
This projection comes 2 days after the central bank said Korea's economy grew at a 6-year low of 2.7% in 2018. The bank expected 140,000 new jobs to be added this year, down from last year's projection of 160,000. BOK Governor Lee Ju-yeol also expressed concerns about slowing global growth, including in the U.S. and China, which could hurt Korea's exports. Already, data by the Korea Customs Service show that between January 1st and 20th this year, overseas shipments fell by 14% on year and exports to China dropped by double digits. Sales of semiconductors, a key driver of growth in recent years, tumbled almost 30% on year in January. On slowing global and domestic growth, the Bank of Korea's Monetary Policy Board decided unanimously to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 1.75%.
Construction investment is expected to continue to slow down this year. And now Korea's main driver of growth, exports, is likely to slow down too. It remains unclear if government spending can offset those and cushion Korea's growth, like we saw in the fourth quarter last year.
At the same time, a less hawkish U.S. Federal Reserve has eased pressure on the BOK to change its key rate in January. The Bank of Korea said it'll maintain its accommodative monetary policy stance for the year and said it'll make its rate decisions by closely monitoring domestic growth and external uncertainties like the global slowdown and the U.S.-China trade spat. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Now, staying with some economic news, South Korea's consumer sentiment rose slightly in January. The Bank of Korea says the monthly consumer sentiment index climbed 0.6 points on month to 97.5, posting 2 straight months of growth. The central bank attributed the rise to households' expectations on the government's economic revitalization policies and the resumption of US-China trade talks. However, the reading has remained below 100 for 4 consecutive months, meaning there are more pessimists than optimists about the South Korean economy. Sparks are flying in Venezuela as President Nicolas Maduro is facing the most direct challenge to his nearly 6 years in power. The United States and a number of other countries have recognized Juan Guaido, currently the head of the country's National Assembly, as Venezuela's legitimate president. After this challenge to Maduro's leadership, both in and outside Venezuela, we thought we'd get the opinions of Fernando Hideki, who is a freelance journalist in Caracas. So let's cut straight to the chase, Fernando. With everything that's been happening over the past few days, troops shooting live rounds at protesters and people taking to the streets in the hundreds of thousands, do you think Maduro's days are pretty much numbered?
Well, he is still having some control of the army, which gives him some space to deal with. But in the other hand, over 80% of the people in Venezuela want a change in Venezuela, and that means President Maduro go away and be substituted for somebody that will be elected democratically. And in this moment, I think he's in a very weak position, not only because even the low-income communities are protesting about him, for all the economic crisis, but he's holding on in spite of that.
Well, he still has a certain circle of powerful people who are loyal to him, so we're going to have to see how this plays out. But the Trump administration's almost immediate backing of the opposition leader means he's clearly more palatable to Washington than Maduro. What is driving Juan Guaido's popularity in Venezuela?
Actually, more than Guaido himself as a leader, people want to change. And almost anybody will be welcome as an alternative for the change for Maduro. In this case, a young man that so far we really have a clear background, is on that position that is forcing the Maduro government to do different things. In this case, almost anybody, with a clear background will be welcome in order to get Maduro out of the power.
And finally, how do you see this ending? We can assume Maduro is not going to relinquish his power without a serious fight.
Well, people in Venezuela, as I said before, 80% want to change, but they want a peaceful change. And maybe the pressure done by United States, some Latin American countries, and the European Union will finally convince or force him to really negotiate with the opposition and maybe go to a clear and clean elections where probably Maduro will lose it and we will have a pacific change without much trauma.
Okay, well, it was a pleasure speaking with you again, Fernando. You are living through an arduous but potentially momentous time in Venezuela's modern history. Please stay safe for us, and I'm sure we'll be speaking with you again soon. That was Fernando Hideki in Caracas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Some really fascinating insights there from Caracas in Venezuela. Now, back here in South Korea and also in the Middle East. A huge night lies ahead for South Korea in the 2019 Asian Cup in the UAE. Paulo Bento's squad take on Qatar tonight in the quarterfinal stage of the tournament, hoping to book a ticket into the last four. Lee Seung-jae has a preview of the big match.
Still recovering from their 120 minutes of play against Bahrain on Tuesday, South Korea will square off against Qatar, the host nation of the 2022 World Cup, in the Asian Cup quarterfinals at 10 p.m. Korea time. The Taeguk Warriors are undefeated in the tournament so far and are ranked 53rd in the latest FIFA rankings. Qatar is ranked 93rd, but they're coming off of a big 1-0 victory over Iraq in the round of 16. South Korea have a better head-to-head record with 5 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses against Qatar, but their last meeting resulted in a shocking 3-2 defeat during the qualifying phase for the 2018 World Cup. 9 South Korean players who experienced that painful defeat 2 years ago will hope to get revenge on Friday night. Despite winning every game at the Asian Cup, the Taeguk Warriors have yet to show explosive attacking power. The team has had 68 attempts on goal in 4 matches, the most among Asian Cup participants, but only have 6 goals to show for it. Qatar, on the other hand, have been in top form and are the leading scorers at the tournament so far with 11 goals. But what's more impressive is their efficiency, as they've produced those 11 goals from just 45 attempts on goal. In Thursday's quarterfinal, Vietnam lost 1-0 to Japan. Japan slotted home a penalty in the 57th minute to send Vietnam, led by South Korean head coach Park Hang-seo, packing from the tournament. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, cloud seeding is already used in China and Thailand to tackle air pollution. Tests will be conducted on whether this same technology can be used in the battle against fine dust here in South Korea as well. Hong Yu reports.
South Korea is launching a pilot program on Friday that aims to create artificial rain to try and help reduce fine dust. The Korea Meteorological Administration and the Ministry of Environment explained that planes will fly over the western coastline of Gyeonggi-do province, spraying clouds with silver iodide that causes water droplets to form. China, with an advanced technology for creating artificial rain, found out that more than 10 millimeters of rainfall is needed over a 3-hour period to see a 10% reduction of ultra-fine dust density. This means that the amount of rain that can be created is what matters in an artificial rain test. But China, even with its artificial rain-producing missiles and tanks, is struggling to increase precipitation. Thailand, on the other hand, sprayed 3,000 liters of water into the air, but failed to see any effect. Then they moved to using drones to make rain. For Korea, the days that such tests can be carried out are rare because when fine dust settles over the country, there are no rain clouds as the atmosphere is under the influence of an anticyclone. So it's important to customize the technology for Korea's climatic properties. On Friday, the density of fine dust will be measured after cloud seeding starts producing rain. The result of the first test will be announced on Saturday. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
Now, foreign tourists to Seoul have selected the shopping district of Myeongdong and Seoul's palaces as their top places to visit in the South Korean capital. According to research by the Korea Tourism Organization, out of the tourists who have visited South Korea in 2017, tourists from Asia favoured Myeongdong, while American tourists, they preferred the palaces. The main reasons given for choosing to visit Seoul were shopping and visiting historic and cultural heritage sites. The Seoul Metropolitan Government said tourists' image of Korea became more positive after their visit and that Seoul Tourism is helping develop South Korea's brand.
Good morning. We are looking at a relatively mild day with plenty of sunshine in most areas, but there has been a bit of drop in temperatures compared to yesterday. And highs in Seoul will be at 3 degrees Celsius this afternoon, while the rest of the country will see highs ranging from 5 to 9 degrees this afternoon. Meanwhile, regions on the east coast and mountainous parts of Jeju Island will see 1 to 15 centimeters of snowfall from this afternoon until dawn tomorrow. Now, the snow should help to ease the dryness in the air for eastern areas. The rest of the country will continue to have dry conditions, and now Seoul is under a dry weather advisory, so be sure to drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Readings will drop even further over the weekend, but the weather will be mostly sunny into Sunday and air quality will remain decent. A light mix of rain and snow is in the forecast for Monday, but there should not be any major cold snap for another week or so. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time in around 90 minutes from now. That's with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.